The gold pocket watch felt heavy in Sarah Taylor's trembling hand as she stepped through the door of the pawnshop in Redemption Springs, Colorado, 1878. The small bell above the entrance jangled, announcing her arrival like a death knell for what remained of her former life. "I need to sell this," she said, placing her wedding ring on the worn wooden counter. Mr. Finch, the elderly pawnbroker, picked up the simple gold band with a small diamond, examining it through his spectacles. His eyes flitted to Sarah's gaunt face and threadbare dress, then to the visible ribs of her collarbone. "Mighty fine piece, Mrs. Taylor. May I ask why you're parting with it?" His voice carried a practiced indifference, but his eyes betrayed concern. Sarah swallowed hard. "My husband, Thomas, died 3 months ago, typhoid fever." The words still felt raw in her throat. "The bank took our farm last week. I need money for bread." Mr. Finch nodded solemnly. "I'm real sorry for your troubles, madam. I can offer you $5. $5. Barely enough for a week's worth of food, but what choice did she have? Sarah nodded, fighting back tears. Before Mr. Finch could reach for his money box, the bell above the door rang again. Sarah didn't turn to look. She couldn't bear for anyone to witness her shame. "Afternoon, Mr. Finch," came a deep voice from behind her. "Just picking up that saddle I left for repair." "Right away, Mr. Wade," Finch replied, carefully setting Sarah's ring aside. "It's in the back. Give me a moment." As Finch disappeared through a curtained doorway, Sarah felt the stranger's presence behind her. The scent of leather, horses, and open prairie filled her senses. "Bad day?" he asked quietly. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the counter. "The worst of many." She heard a movement and glanced sideways. A tall man in worn cowboy attire stood beside her now, his eyes fixed on her wedding ring. "That's a mighty fine piece," he said. "It was," Sarah replied. Mr. Finch returned with a repaired saddle. "Here you are, Mr. Wade. Fix that torn girth strap good as new." The cowboy Mr. Wade paid for his repair, but his attention remained on Sarah and the ring. As Finch counted out $5 for Sarah, the cowboy cleared his throat. "How much would you take for that ring, Mr. Finch?" he asked casually. Finch raised an eyebrow. "Not your usual purchase, Samuel, but I'd price it at $15 for resale." Samuel Wade nodded and placed $15 on the counter. "I'll take it." Sarah's head snapped up in surprise. Her ring wasn't worth nearly that much. "Sir, you don't have to. Business is business, madam," Wade said, tipping his hat. "Mr. Finch here knows a good deal when he sees one, don't you?" Finch looked between them, a small smile playing at his lips. "Indeed I do. 15 it is." He pushed Sarah's original $5 back toward her and added 10 more. Sarah stared at the money. $15 would keep her fed for a month, maybe more if she was careful. "Thank you," she whispered, gathering the money with trembling fingers. Wade picked up the ring and slipped it into his vest pocket. "My pleasure, madam." He tipped his hat again and turned to leave, saddle under his arm. Sarah collected herself and hurried out after him. The afternoon sun momentarily blinded her as she stepped onto the dusty main street of Redemption Springs. "Mr. Wade," she called. He turned, squinting against the sun. Up close, she could see his features clearly, deep-set blue eyes and a weather-beaten face, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and sun-bleached brown hair curling from beneath his hat. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Do what, madam?" "Pay 3 times what my ring is worth." He studied her for a moment. "Maybe I have a sweetheart who'd appreciate such a fine piece." "You're lying," Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness. His mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Perhaps, or perhaps I just don't like seeing a lady in distress." "I don't need charity," she said, although the money in her pocket argued otherwise. "Not offering any, just making a purchase." He shifted his saddle to his other arm. "Though I admit I don't have much use for a lady's wedding ring." "Maybe you'd consider buying it back someday when times are better." Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity. "Times won't be getting better, Mr. Wade." "Then perhaps you'd consider dinner instead. I'm staying at the boarding house down the street. Mrs. Porter sets a fine table." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. That would be highly inappropriate. I'm in mourning. Just a meal, Mrs. Taylor. Sounds like you could use one. His eyes held no judgment, only concern. Sarah hesitated. She hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. Just dinner, she finally agreed. Nothing more. 6 o'clock, he said with a nod, then turned and continued down the street, his spurs jingling with each step. Sarah watched him go, wondering what kind of man buys a stranger's wedding ring for 3 times its worth, then invites her to dinner. Mrs. Porter's boarding house was the nicest in Redemption Springs, which wasn't saying much. But the parlor was clean, the food smelled delicious, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt something other than despair. Samuel Wade waited in the parlor, hat in hand, looking decidedly uncomfortable among the doilies and flowered upholstery. When he saw Sarah, he stood quickly. "Mrs. Taylor," he greeted with a nod. "Mr. Wade." He led her into the dining room where several other boarders were already seated. Mrs. Porter, a plump woman with graying hair, showed them to a small table near the window. "I took the liberty of ordering for both of us," Wade said as they sat. "Hope you don't mind roast beef." "Not at all," Sarah replied, smoothing her faded dress. It was the best she owned, though that wasn't saying much. "You're not from around here," he observed as Mrs. Porter brought plates heaped with roast beef, potatoes, and carrots. Sarah shook her head. "My husband and I came west from Pennsylvania 5 years ago. We had a small farm outside town. And now," she cut a small piece of beef, savoring the rich flavor. "And now I have nothing. The bank took everything except what I could carry." "What will you do?" Sarah had asked herself the same question 100 times. "I don't know, find work, I suppose." "Though there's little enough for a woman in a town like this," Wade nodded thoughtfully. "I've got a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Nothing fancy, but it's growing. Might need some help around the place." Sarah put down her fork. "Mr. Wade, if this is some sort of proposition, it's not," he said quickly, his cheeks reddening. "I meant honest work, cooking, cleaning. I've got hands who need feeding, a house that needs keeping." "Why would you offer work to a stranger?" He seemed to consider his words carefully. "Let's just say I know what it's like to lose everything." They ate in silence for a few minutes. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she'd had food this good or this plentiful. "Think about it," Wade said finally. "Pays $20 a month plus room and board." $20 a month was more than many men earned. That's very generous. "Not really. It's hard work and I'm not always the easiest man to get along with, or so I'm told." There was that half-smile again. "I'll consider it," Sarah said, though in truth she had few other options. As they finished their meal, Wade reached into his pocket and pulled out her wedding ring. He placed it on the table between them. "This belongs to you," he said. "I have no need for it." Sarah stared at the small gold band. "I can't pay you back, not yet." "Consider it an advance on your wages should you decide to take the job." Sarah hesitated, then shook her head. "No, you bought it fairly. Keep it until I can buy it back properly." Wade nodded and returned the ring to his pocket. "As you wish." The next morning, Sarah waited outside the general store with a small bundle of belongings. She had spent a restless night weighing her limited options. Working as a housekeeper on a remote ranch with a man she barely knew was risky, but starvation was a certainty if she stayed in town with no prospects. Samuel Wade arrived precisely when he said he would, driving a wagon loaded with supplies. He hopped down and helped Sarah onto the seat. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," she replied. The journey to the ranch took most of the morning. As they traveled, the landscape opened up into rolling grasslands backed by distant mountains. Wade pointed out landmarks and boundaries, speaking of his land with quiet pride. "It's not much to look at yet," he said as they crested a hill and the ranch came into view. "But it will be someday." A modest 2-story house stood flanked by a large barn, corral, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the distant pastures and smoke rose from the chimney of what Wade explained was the bunkhouse. "3 hands live there," he said. "Good men, you'll meet them at supper." The main house was simple but solidly built. Inside, it was spare but clean, with functional furniture and little ornamentation. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right," Wade said, carrying her bundle. "Mine's at the end of the hall. The other rooms are empty for now." Sarah followed him upstairs, taking in her new surroundings. The bedroom was small but pleasant, with a comfortable-looking bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the ranch yard. "I'll leave you to settle in," Wade said, placing her bundle on the bed. "Kitchen's fully stocked. Make yourself at home." Over the next few weeks, Sarah fell into a routine. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Wade and his ranch hands, Miguel, a skilled horseman from Mexico, Ezra, an older man with a talent for carpentry, and James, a young cowboy barely out of his teens. She cleaned the house, washed clothes, baked bread, and prepared hearty meals that the men devoured with appreciative comments. Wade himself was often gone from sunrise to sunset, working alongside his men. When he was at the house, he was polite but reserved, careful to maintain a respectful distance. One evening in late October, Sarah found him on the front porch after supper, smoking a cigarette and staring at the sunset. "May I join you?" she asked. He nodded, offering her the rocking chair while he leaned against the porch railing. "You've been good for this place," he said after a companionable silence. "The men have stopped complaining about my cooking, for one thing." Sarah smiled. "Your biscuits were rather like stones from what I hear." "Slander and lies," he said with mock indignation, but his eyes crinkled with humor. "Mr. Wade, Samuel, please. After all this time, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Samuel, then, and I'm Sarah." She took a deep breath. "I'd like to buy back my ring. I've saved most of my wages." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his vest pocket. The ring glinted in the fading light as he held it out to her. "No need to pay," he said. "Like I told you before, it's yours." Sarah shook her head. "I insist. I don't want to be beholden." "You're not beholden. You work hard for your wages." "Please," she said firmly. "My pride is all I have left." Understanding crossed his face. He nodded and accepted the money she offered. Sarah slipped the ring back onto her finger, feeling its familiar weight. "Thank you. May I ask about him? Your husband?" Sarah was surprised by the question but found she didn't mind. "Thomas was a dreamer. He saw possibility in everything. That's why we came west. He had visions of a prosperous farm, children running in the fields." She smiled sadly. The land had other ideas: drought, hail, early frost. But he never lost hope, even at the end. Samuel was quiet for a moment. "He sounds like a good man." He was. "What about you? Have you ever been married?" He shook his head. "Never found the time, or maybe the right woman." His eyes met hers briefly before returning to the horizon. "Been too busy trying to make something of this place." "You've done well," Sarah said. "It's a fine ranch. It's getting there. Another year or two and I'll have enough saved to expand." The conversation shifted to his plans for the ranch: more cattle, better breeding stock, perhaps horses eventually. As night fell and the stars emerged, Sarah realized she'd never heard him speak so much at once. "I should turn in," she said finally, rising from the rocking chair. "Early day tomorrow." "Good night, Sarah," he said, tipping his hat. "Good night, Samuel." Winter arrived with a vengeance in November. Heavy snow blanketed the ranch and bitter winds howled around the house at night. The men worked shortened days, focusing on keeping the cattle fed and sheltered. Sarah kept the house warm and welcoming, with stews simmering on the stove and fresh bread in the oven. In the evenings, they often gathered in the main room. Ezra taught her to play checkers, Miguel shared stories of his homeland, and young James entertained them with harmonica music. Samuel usually sat slightly apart, whittling or reading one of the few books he owned. But Sarah often caught him watching her, his expression thoughtful. One particularly harsh evening, with the wind shrieking like a banshee, Sarah was startled by a knock at her bedroom door. "Everything all right?" Samuel asked when she opened it. He stood in the hallway, lamp in hand. "Yes, why? Thought I heard something, just checking." Sarah smiled at his concern. "Just the wind playing tricks, though I admit it's a bit frightening." "These old houses make all sorts of noises. You'll get used to it," He hesitated. "If you're having trouble sleeping, I've got a book that might help." "Dull as dishwater, guaranteed to put you out like a snuffed candle," Sarah laughed. "That sounds perfect." He returned moments later with a thick volume on cattle breeding. Their hands brushed as he passed it to her, and something electric passed between them. For a moment, neither moved. "Well," he said finally, stepping back. "Good night, then." "Good night, Samuel. Thank you for checking on me." After he left, Sarah sat on her bed, the forgotten book in her lap, thinking about the man down the hall and the strange way her heart had quickened at his touch. Christmas approached, bringing with it a rare, festive atmosphere to the ranch. Sarah decorated the house with pine boughs and dried berries, and even Samuel seemed infected by the holiday spirit, returning from town with small gifts for everyone. On Christmas Eve, after the hands had retired to the bunkhouse with their presents, new gloves for Ezra, a silver belt buckle for Miguel, and a new harmonica for James, Samuel handed Sarah a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said gruffly. Inside was a beautiful blue wool shawl, soft and warm. "It's lovely," Sarah whispered, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Thought it might match your eyes," he said, then looked embarrassed at his own words. Sarah felt a blush warm her cheeks. "I have something for you too." She handed him a parcel containing a new leather-bound journal. "For your ranch accounts, I noticed your old one was falling apart." "Thank you," he said, running his hand over the smooth leather. "It's perfect." They sat beside the fire, talking quietly as snow fell outside. Samuel spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his journey west after the war, and his years of saving to buy this land. Sarah shared stories of her own family back east, people she hadn't seen in years. The mantel clock struck midnight, and Samuel stood to add another log to the fire. "Did you ever want children?" Sarah asked suddenly. He looked surprised by the question. "Never gave it much thought, needed to build something worth passing on first, I suppose." He poked at the fire. "Did you and Thomas?" "We tried," Sarah said softly. "It never happened." Samuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "There's still time, you're young yet. Perhaps." She looked down at her wedding ring, twisting it on her finger. "Though at times it feels like that part of my life is over." "Nothing's over until you decide it is," he said. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. Samuel cleared his throat and stood. "It's late. We should turn in." Sarah nodded, gathering her new shawl around her. At the foot of the stairs, she impulsively stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "Merry Christmas, Samuel." His expression softened. "Merry Christmas, Sarah." January brought a brief thaw, allowing the men to check on distant cattle and repair fences damaged by snow and wind. Sarah used the opportunity to air out the house and do a thorough cleaning. In Samuel's room, she found a small wooden box on his dresser. She hadn't meant to pry, but it lay open, revealing her wedding ring nestled inside. Next to it was a folded piece of paper. Curiosity overcame her propriety. She unfolded the paper to find a receipt from the jeweler in town, dated the previous week. Samuel had paid to have the ring cleaned and the small diamond reset. Sarah quickly refolded the paper and closed the box, her mind whirling. Why would he do that? The answer seemed both impossible and increasingly obvious. That evening, Samuel returned later than usual, his clothes wet from melting snow. "You'll catch your death," Sarah scolded, taking his coat and hat. "There's hot water for a bath and stew keeping warm on the stove." "You're an angel," he said, the words slipping out naturally. They both paused, surprised. "Hardly that," Sarah recovered first. "Just doing my job." "Is that all it is?" Samuel asked quietly. "A job?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah's heart pounded. "I should check on the stew," she said, retreating to the kitchen. Samuel followed her. "Sarah, I found my ring in your room," she blurted out. "When I was cleaning, I wasn't snooping, I swear." He ran a hand through his hair. "I should explain. Why did you have it reset?" "Because it deserved to be worn again. Because you deserve something beautiful." He took a deep breath. "Because I can't stop thinking about you wearing it, but not as Thomas's widow." Sarah stared at him, scarcely believing what she was hearing. Samuel, let me finish, please. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving, but I need you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. He stepped closer. I've never met anyone like you, Sarah. Your strength, your kindness, even after everything you've lost. You make this house a home. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, just know that I care for you deeply, the rest can wait. He turned to leave, but Sarah caught his arm. I care for you too, she whispered. More than I should, perhaps, but I'm afraid. Of what? Of forgetting Thomas, of losing again, of feeling this much. Samuel gently wiped a tear from her cheek. We can take it slow, day by day. Sarah nodded, and he pulled her into a tentative embrace. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in months. February brought more snow and an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Harris from Redemption Springs arrived one afternoon, seeking shelter from the storm. Over dinner, he shared news from town and mentioned in passing that the bank that had foreclosed on Sarah's farm had been investigated for fraud. Seems they were taking properties illegally all over the county, Harris explained. Judge has ordered restitution to affected parties. Sarah nearly dropped her fork. What does that mean exactly? Means you might be entitled to compensation, Mrs. Taylor. You should come to town when the weather clears, speak to Judge Parker. That night, Samuel found Sarah on the porch, wrapped in her blue shawl despite the cold. You'll go back, won't you? He asked, joining her. To your farm. I don't know, she admitted. It was Thomas's dream, not mine. What is your dream, Sarah? She looked up at the star-filled sky. For a long time, survival was enough. I didn't dare want more. She turned to him. But lately, I've been dreaming of a future. Here, Samuel's face lit up with hope. With me, if you'll have me. If I'll, Sarah, I've been hoping for exactly that since the day I saw you in that pawn shop. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gently at first, then with growing passion as she responded in kind. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Sarah Taylor. I think I have since that first day. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling both foreign and perfectly right on her tongue. In March, Sarah traveled to Redemption Springs with Samuel to meet with Judge Parker. The compensation offered for the fraudulent foreclosure was substantial enough to buy a small property or invest in a business. Or invest in a ranch, Samuel suggested as they rode home. As a partner, Sarah smiled. Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Wade? Not exactly. He reined his horse to a stop and dismounted, then helped Sarah down. From his pocket, he withdrew the familiar gold band with its newly reset diamond. Dropping to one knee in the middle of the trail, he held up the ring. Sarah Taylor, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to cherish you, support your dreams, and build a life worthy of your strength and beauty. Tears of joy filled Sarah's eyes. Yes, she said, her voice strong and sure. Yes, Samuel Wade, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it had always belonged, but now with new meaning. They were married in April, with the ranch hands as witnesses and Mrs. Porter from the boarding house making the journey to prepare a wedding feast. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, held in the parlor of the house that had become their home. Sarah wore a new dress of soft cream calico with her blue shawl around her shoulders. Samuel, freshly shaved and dressed in his best clothes, looked at her as though she were the most precious thing he'd ever seen. As they exchanged vows, Sarah thought of the journey that had brought her here from desperation in a pawn shop to love on a promising ranch. The wedding ring that had once symbolized all she had lost now represented everything she had found. Later, as they danced to James's harmonica music, Samuel whispered in her ear, I never told you why I was in that pawn shop that day. Why? Sarah asked, curious. I was having my mother's locket repaired. I'd kept it all these years, waiting to give it to the woman I would marry. He smiled. Seems fate knew what it was doing, sending me there just as you were selling your ring. Do you believe in fate? Sarah asked. Samuel twirled her gently. I believe that sometimes, The hardest moments lead us exactly where we need to be. As spring turned to summer, the ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Sarah's compensation money went toward new breeding stock, and Samuel's careful management expanded their holdings. They converted one of the empty upstairs rooms into a nursery, painted yellow and filled with hope. By the following Christmas, they were blessed with news that their family would be growing by summer. On their first wedding anniversary, Samuel presented Sarah with a delicate gold chain. "For your first wedding ring," he explained, "so you can keep Thomas's memory close to your heart while wearing my ring on your hand." The thoughtful gesture brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "You are a remarkable man, Samuel Wade. Just a man who recognizes the value of the past that shaped the woman I love." He placed his hand on her growing belly, "and who looks forward to our future." In July 1880, Sarah gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Grace. As she nursed her child in the rocking chair on the porch, watching Samuel work in the yard below, she reflected on the strange and winding path that had led her here. She had once sold her wedding ring for bread, desperate and alone. Now she wore a different ring, given with love by a man who had seen her value when she could not see it herself. The gold band gleamed in the sunlight as she stroked her daughter's cheek, a tangible symbol of how life could begin again, even after the deepest loss. Samuel looked up as if sensing her gaze and smiled. He set aside his tools and climbed the porch steps to join his family. Sitting beside them, he placed a gentle kiss on Grace's head, then one on Sarah's lips. "Happy?" he asked. Sarah leaned against his shoulder, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. "More than I ever dreamed possible." The setting sun cast golden light across the thriving ranch, their home, their future, built on an unexpected second chance that had begun with a wedding ring in a pawn shop.